Welcome back to the Customers Who Click podcast. It's episode 23, and I've got another great guest for you. Today's guest is the founder of Visably, which is a software solution that helps you manage your search visibility. We're not just talking about your standard SEO, though. It's not so much about how you can get your own website all over page one. We're talking about how you can ensure your brand has a presence across page one, regardless of what sites appear there. So it's kind of a mix of SEO and PR. But let's get Chris on to explain how this all works and how you can dominate page one. Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, a bit of your background and what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Will. Thanks for having me. I have been a career marketer for the last 17 years. I've worked in all facets of the marketing industry, from in-house kind of product marketing to agencies to publishing, and now MarTech. So for the last 11 years, I've been running my own PR agency, and then started a company called Visably, which is a software solution to help manage and measure brand footprint and search in 2019. And we just released the beta a month ago.
Awesome. Sounds great. So, what's the standard day look like for you at the moment then?
Oh man, is there such a thing? Especially during a pandemic.
Yeah. I keep forgetting that when I ask the question. It's like, well, all right, let's consider it a normal.
Yeah, it's like whatever we're doing today. Yeah. Well, today I happen to be in Glacier National Park, which is one of the major national parks in the United States, and staring at a gorgeous window at a river. But that's not a standard day. Typically, I'm in an office, and I have a 4-year-old, so I wake up to her every morning. And then I do still run the PR agency. So the agency work kind of has to be balanced with the software work. The software is the majority of my time for sure. But yeah, got a lot of balls in the air. And then I try to get some exercise in too.
Awesome. Sounds great. So yeah, I guess tell us a bit more about Visably and your kind of approach to, I think you described it before as dominating page one.
Yeah, I think, I'll just back up for a minute here and tell kind of, why I started Visably and why I thought there was a need for it in the market. Visably, what we saw as a PR agency back, say scroll back like kind of 3-4 years ago, was that the impact of earned media, that is media that you earn through editorial content or journalism, was having less and less of an impact unless it was showing up in search results. And so, you can go out and we can win a big article, say for, a major publication or magazine. The problem with that strategy in and of itself is that the distribution model isn't what it used to be. People don't go to the newsstand or pick up a magazine to find information. They do it for leisure, if that. The print circulations are obviously on the decline nationally. Most people are finding what they need through digital landscapes. And then, within those digital landscapes, it's just so darn busy, right? We all know that. Like, the publishing cycle is happening every few minutes. There's something new showing up on the homepage, and whatever was there 5 minutes ago has dropped below the fold, and all of a sudden it's effectively gone, for that point in I think in the publishing cycle. So what we started recognizing as a PR agency was that the most valuable PR hits that we were acquiring for our clients were showing up kind of, on their own at the top of search results, for really valuable keywords that were attracting, lots of people, lots of qualified customers. And, that by itself became the most valuable thing that we were doing for our clients. And we weren't doing it deliberately. It was just kind of happening naturally here and there. And so we started thinking to ourselves, how can we be more deliberate about this process? How can we win more PR that was showing up at the top of search for really important keywords? So we started with that and recognized, how important PR is in that landscape. And then as we started recognizing kind of the role of PR in search, we recognized that there is all these kind of third-party resources that were talking about brands and products and services that were super under-leveraged. And not only were they under-leveraged, but you couldn't measure them, right? Like, unless it's your own website or your own advertising, there's no measurement out there for it. And so what you can't measure, you can't improve, you can't kind of wrap your head around, you can't build strategy around. So it really all comes down to measurement. It really comes down to understanding, where we are today, where we want to go tomorrow, and how to get there. And the first page of search is this insane product discovery platform. It's and let me tell you why. It's there's like, if you think about the people who are typing in keywords, they are information seekers. They're people who are qualified customers. They're pretty down. They're pretty far down the funnel in terms of having an intent to buy. They're kind of what you would call like they're at that point of consideration, if you will, and they're looking for recommendations and how do they make a purchase decision? They're going to search to fulfill that need, and then it's very predictable about where they're going to click on that first page of search. So you have, millions of people showing up at the first page of search every single day. By the way, there's 70,000 searches every single second of the day, every single day, always. So it's an incredibly used platform. It's increasing by 10 to 15% every single year. People are using search more and more in their daily lives. It's an incredibly powerful place to connect with the consumer. But, back to their click behavior, it's the first 5 organic links on a page receive around 70% of all the traffic for that keyword. As you drop down to the bottom of the first page, that 10th or 9th organic link on the page receives around 1% of all the traffic for any given keyword. And there's virtually no traffic to speak of on the second page. So what we're really talking about as marketers is how that real estate, that gold real estate, where you can really have a fighting chance of connecting with a customer looking for your product and service, is in those top 5 organic results. Great, right? We know exactly where the people are. We know exactly where they're clicking. Wonderful. Well, not so fast, because it becomes incredibly challenging to rank there, especially for your own website. And that's where SEO becomes like this really important thing. And there's billions of dollars spent on SEO every single year. I think my problem with SEO is that the SEO community has come to accept the fact that their most desirable keywords, the keywords that they really want to be ranking for, are simply out of reach. They're just never ever going to rank for them. So the SEO community has kind of come to accept this like lower threshold of success, which is like, oh, let's spend a lot of time and money like researching keywords to look for, keywords where there's a decent opportunity but like low competition, and that's kind of the name of the game in SEO right now, is like low competition, and low competition generally means less people. It might mean a more targeted customer, but you're just not getting in front of as many people. You're just giving up on the big ones, essentially. And so, with PR, you can absolutely go right after the top dog. You can go after those very, very expensive, high value, high traffic keywords. And it's not just PR. It turns out there's a huge opportunity with e-commerce there. There's a huge opportunity with other types of media. Like one that I'm a big fan of is a Quora, or any kind of questions that, Google loves to elevate answers to the top of search that are more colloquial. Back to e-commerce, there's a massive opportunity to work with your e-commerce partners to better merchandise your brand, product, and services on their search engine landing pages. So if someone's looking for a pair of socks and Amazon shows up, the big question is are your socks on Amazon's landing page? If they are, you're going to sell a lot of socks. If they're not, too bad. So again, like, how do you collect that intelligence on where your brand is in search? And that's kind of what Visably is all about.
When I do searches for kind of news and information, so example, I do a search for Manchester United every day in the morning. One of the first things, just to check the latest news and stuff. I don't have a single website that I go to myself. I always just go to the news feed and I open up basically the first page worth of articles, and that's it. So, obviously there's no purchase intent there. It's all news and stuff. But Yeah, as you point that, you might not be able to dominate. You might not be able to get yourself onto that first page, but it might be the case that people aren't even looking for your brand specifically.
Yeah, I think what people want to focus on as marketers are non-branded keywords. What are the keywords? What are the search queries that people are going to are going to use to find they're using characteristics, they're describing the product or service that they want to buy, and they're looking for recommendations around it. And if they're not using a brand within that keyword, that means that they're up for grabs, right? They're not somebody who has already determined that I'm going to buy an Adidas football shoe. We're gonna buy. I'm looking for the best football shoe, or a football shoe for slick conditions, or whatever it might be. Those are the keywords that marketers really want to focus in on, because they're those like top of funnel. Like, how do we get new customers into our funnel? And if someone doesn't know that you exist, or isn't set on like they're not brand loyal, that's the perfect person for you to get in front of, because obviously they're exhibiting an intent to purchase.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can get yourself on, for those, like, what sort of trainers work well on a slick surface or AstroTurf and that sort of thing? I guess the more likely results that are going to appear are blogs and articles and comparisons and things. So making sure that you are one of those items on those pages
Exactly.
could be massive for you, because that could be quite easy. It might just be a case of sending a pair of shoes over.
It is actually that easy a lot of the times. As a PR agency, I can tell you that. I think, where PR people struggle, and it's not struggle's not the right word, but one of our biggest challenges is, how do we know who to talk to? How do we, it's list building, Will. It's like the idea of, how do we put together a really powerful, potent list of people who are the most relevant content writers in this category? And there's a lot of investment in that type of list building, like whether it's you're just doing a ton of research, or you use a major PR platform like a Cision or something like that. Or what I think is really fascinating is, why don't PR people just use Google? Google is already elevating the most relevant content in the world for this particular subject, according to their algorithm. It's all showing up in the one place. I think the challenge with that is that it's already published. So I think some people are like, oh, well, if it's already published, why am I going after it? Well, I can tell you right now, if those are the writers that are writing about that thing, you need to get to know them. You need to reach out and make relationships. And so, and it's sometimes it is as easy as saying, will you update your article to include my product? And frankly, that happens all the time for us. But the other piece of it is that you start to get this Rolodex, and this is what PR people do, is they build these massive Rolodexes of content writers that are the experts in their client's space. And then we just manage those relationships. Well, Google is going to tell you better than any other platform in the world who the experts are. And so again, Visably, this software solution that I'm behind, helps do that, which is kind of cool. So one of the things that I recognize is that, Google search elevates all this different stuff. It's a big multi-channel sandbox, right? Like there's e-commerce, like I said, and earned media, and there's brand-owned stuff. That's the SEO stuff. There's advertising. It's all mixed together on the first page. The challenge is how do you cleanly extract the PR hits? How do you cleanly extract the e-commerce stuff so you can just focus on what you need to focus on? So we've solved for that. We went out and we categorized literally millions of domains as either e-commerce or brand owned or earned media or something else. And so when you run a search on Visably, not only do we identify where your brand exists on the page, and so we're we're crawling and looking through all of the links on the page of the search, not just the domains, but we're looking at the content. And then secondarily, we're classifying the type of website it is. And so we're telling you, is it e-commerce or media or something else? And what that does is it provides this really rich data set by which you kind of have this roadmap for what you need to do next. It's like, here are your blind spots. Here's where you're doing well. And here are the channels that are, that are responsible for these various hits. So, here are all your e-commerce pieces that you need to be focused on. Here are all your media pieces that you should be focused on. And so it is this very multi-channel way of managing search. And I think that's what's exciting to me is that, in the past, it's been heavily SEO focused. So it's like, it's either your website shows up on the first page or it doesn't, one or the other. It's very binary like that. But when you open it up and you look at like, okay, we're going to manage this from a multi-channel perspective. We're going to manage this from we're going to manage every single potential touch point on the first page of search, regardless of whether we own it or not. It becomes much more rich, and it becomes like you can be much more dominant because, rather than it might be that your website showed up on the 5th position and that was a huge hit. Well, what if not only did your website show up in the 5th position, but this first, second, and third position are also talking about your brand. So virtually anywhere on the page that somebody clicks, they're going to learn about your products and your stuff. That is a massive win. That's what we should be going for.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've worked with a lot of PR people, some agencies. I've done a lot of work in that space. And it's never really been pitched to me like that. I've had the whole PR for SEO sort of approach, and that kind of those getting exposure on big sites and things. But yeah, it's never really been positioned as if you can't get yourself in that space, we can put you there on someone else's site, sort of.
Yeah, and I think I think as a marketer, most multi-channel kind of brand marketers understand this, but I think what happens is we get very siloed in our marketing spaces, right? Like as a PR professional or SEO professional or SEM professional, whatever it might be. But ultimately, as the person who's managing all the levers, if you will, they realize more than anyone else that it doesn't matter how you promote product discovery so long as you connect with the customer. It might be an ad, it might be a PR hit, it might be an email, but all of those points of discovery are equally relevant in that customer journey. And, that is the fundamental truth here, is that it doesn't matter how you reach somebody so long as you reach them. And so why not find all the potential touch points that you can exploit?
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. So what are some of the kind of misconceptions or myths about search engine visibility? I know you mentioned this whole, the main keywords are basically impossible to get. So people don't bother and they move on to those kind of longer tail stuff. But what else is there?
Yeah, I think the big one that you kind of hit on, and I'll just kind of expand on it for a minute, is the idea that if you do everything right, you can show up in the first page of search for your, with your content. And unfortunately, that's just not true. We as an agency have seen that time and time again, where our clients have done the right thing on their website. They've done the right keyword research. They've done the right content work, and they see really immediate gains from, say, page 7 to page 2. They jump like multiple pages up like immediately, and then they just hit a glass ceiling. They just hit, they cannot move any further up in the rankings from page 2. And the reason for that is because the relative domain authority of the sites that are in front of them start to become exponentially greater. So much so that they're stuck, absolutely fundamentally stuck. And that, I think, is a really, really common problem with almost every single SEO strategy out there, unless you're a major player in the space. And it's not to say like, hey, look, SEO is fantastic. Like if we could all get our own websites, like at the top of search, that would be amazing. Like of course we want to control the message in front of the consumer, but I think the reality is that is very rare. And the people who do that are these kind of Olympic level websites that are standing on top of a podium, and there's many people that didn't get on that podium. But I think at the end of the day, it's really imperative for marketers to think about search from a multi-channel perspective and to realize that there's all these different touch points, and that it's not just about your website; it's about every possible way of reaching a consumer.
So, what would be the first things you'd do when starting with a new client or a project?
Right. So, I think that's kind of two prongs here. So I do have this PR agency, which keeps me pretty busy. It's a totally separate company from Visably. Visably is a independent software solution that has no crossover except for me, I guess. But from an agency perspective, what I can tell you is that we start with an analysis of keywords, and we look at what are the big keywords out there that we're most interested in, the ones that are driving the most traffic, and from a PR perspective, we look at it. We need to identify keywords that have strong potential for PR. Not every keyword does, and actually, where this comes into play is this idea of search engine intent. And a lot of SEOs are really interested in intent right now. Intent is the idea that you type in a keyword to Google, and Google has to make a determination about what do you want to do. By, say you type in a keyword, something very broad, like running shoes. And Google's thinking to itself, does this person want to buy a pair of running shoes? Do they want to read about running shoes in the news? Do they want to learn about running shoes and what kind of running shoes to buy? They have to make that determination. And so, they have various kind of responses. So in the past, I think that you used to be able to get away with just doing direct keyword matches and having, a lot of backlinks, and then Google would basically, reward keyword matches with the strongest domain authority, and boom, you're at the top of search. Now it's not that simple anymore. You have to Google is interpreting the intent of the keyword and then elevating results that match what they interpret the intent to be. And so there's really kind of three different kind of core intents out there, if you will. One will be called informational, and I describe informational intent as click to learn, like you're learning about something. And then there's transactional, which is click to buy. And then lastly, you have this thing that they call navigational intent, and that's click to go. And that's like somebody already knows where they want to go. They effectively, they're looking for a specific website, but maybe they don't know the name or like the URL of the website, or it's just more convenient to use Google to find the website for them. And so it's really just navigational. They're using Google as like a way to just get from point A to point B faster than doing it themselves. But from a PR perspective, what we're most interested in is that first one, and that is click to learn, informational intent. So what we have to do is we first start off with those keywords that we go for the best keywords out there. We go for the most competitive keywords that have that are driving the most traffic and have the most potential for customer acquisition. And then number two, we have to do a second round of bucketing, if you will. So once we've identified a bunch of commercial or a bunch of informational keywords, we have to bucket those. Once we've developed a big list of competitive keywords that we feel like are relevant to our client's product, we have to bucket those into informational versus transactional. So which ones are informational, which ones are transactional? The reason why we don't focus on transactional is because they tend to be really dominant by e-commerce. And there's just no opportunity for PR in those pages. If Google is elevating all e-commerce hits, they're just not going to elevate a PR hit there. That's just, they've decided that's not the intent of the keyword. So that's why we go ahead and we kind of sort those out. We focus exclusively on keywords with informational intent. And then from there, we do this analysis of where does the brand already exist on the page, which of these writers are already covering our stuff, and it gives us like this really good sense of like, where were we successful, where do we miss opportunities, and how do we fix those opportunities. And it gives us like this great media list. So we all of a sudden we can see, here are the publications that are writing about this kind of product or service. Here are the actual, most of those publications will tell you, will actually have a byline in there, and they'll tell you like who the writer is. You can cross-reference that writer within your PR, media database, and boom, you have this really rich this really rich media list. From there, our PR starts to kick in, and we start doing the outreach, we start doing the product seeding, we start doing the follow-up, and then we come back and we check a few months later, and boom, our reviews are all over the page, and we're dominating that page that was previously totally out of reach for our clients. So is it a long process? Yes. I think any PR is always a long game. Like, that's just how it is. Very rarely can you just go out and like dominate the news cycle in like a minute. It takes a lot of work and takes like a very concerted effort over many months. But if you want to win in these highly desirable keyword searches, that's the way to do it. It's entirely possible. Our agency's been doing it for years.
Yeah. So a lot of research, a lot of kind of relationship building and conversations, and just making sure you find the right websites that would suit your brand in the right places, and I suppose making sure they get the right information as well. So, like you said, you don't really want to target transactional, because you're not going to. You can get your products listed on Amazon, obviously, but
it's just not transactional stuff. It's just not something that we deal with. We don't have those relationships. They're outside of our discipline as an agency. But the PR stuff, but it brings up a really important point, because there is somebody who is managing that relationship with Amazon, and that person would really benefit from this information. So, Visably isn't just about PR. I think PR is a big piece of it, but it's really about multi-channel. It's about, I think e-commerce has a huge opportunity with using the platform.
Yeah, I suppose with that Amazon example, you'd be saying, well, we think there's a great opportunity for this brand to be on page one for this keyword, which is, an Amazon dominated keyword. So the person with the Amazon relationship needs to make sure that your products are on the first page of Amazon's landing page for that product listing. Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. And you do that and you sell a lot of product. It's just overnight success. So, understanding kind of where your blind spots are and how your customers are kind of coming into the funnel is super critical. And I think, search is this incredibly powerful place to get a very, very targeted customer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the reason why PPC works so well, isn't it?
It is. PPC is interesting too. I think, another thing that I think is powerful about Visably is that it's, you have to ask yourself as a cost per click or pay-per-click kind of manager, do I need to advertise in search results where I have very strong brand visibility? I don't know. That's up to you. But, I've talked to a lot of brand managers who would say, well, if I knew that we were that dominant with that keyword, I would probably reallocate our budget toward keywords that we're less dominant in. So we're reaching more people, because there's two ways to reach a consumer. You can do it through the advertising, or you can do it through the organic, optimization. In the past, I think SEM managers will look at those organic results, and they'd either say, oh, we either have like a website presence here or not. Well, forget your website for a minute. Do we have a brand presence here or not? Are all these PR hits or all these e-commerce hits actually driving traffic toward our brand? Yes or no? And so that's really the fundamental shift here, is saying, let's forget about just your website for a minute. Let's focus on your brand. And is your brand visibility high within the search engine results page or not? Yes or no? If it is, maybe you reallocate some of that advertising spend toward results where you have lower brand visibility in the organic results.
Yeah, completely. I know a lot of companies use it a bit kind of, I guess, defensively. So, if they are quite dominant on a page, but someone else is bidding, then they might, bid in order to kind of protect that space. But yeah, I think, it makes sense. If you are pretty dominant on a page for a keyword, and maybe there's not actually much advertising going on, there's no real point advertising yourself and spending money there, because you're spending money on traffic that you probably would have captured anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what's interesting about Payperclick is that the click-through rates on those ads are variable depending on the keyword query. So a high click-through rate for a non-branded keyword query, this is somebody who's not looking for a specific brand, is around 2 to 2.5%. That's a good performing ad, which means that 98% of the traffic on that page is clicking somewhere else. Like I said, so where you get really high click-through rate with advertising is when people are actually searching for your own brand, and then your ad is at the very top of the page, and they're like, "Oh, well, there you go. That's what I was looking for." So I'll click on it. And it probably does make sense to just capture that customer right away. But like either way about it, I think pay-per-click is really important, but it should be balanced with organic visibility. And at the end of the day, the organic results always have higher click-through rates, always have more engagement, and they're frankly free. So. Those are all really awesome characteristics of why you would want to work in the organic results as well.
Yeah, and I think just one final point on that. If you are bidding on kind of brand terms or pages where you are really dominant organically, it's important. I think it's really important that people are measuring that and just kind of understanding like potentially how much traffic they're just paying for, which they could have got organically. And just acknowledging that there is an opportunity cost to that.
Yeah, totally.
So what are the biggest and most kind of common mistakes you see when people approach search engine visibility?
I think the biggest mistakes are not doing a good job with search intent. And intent is just so critical to actually getting coverage or traction on the page, to understand the type of results, not just like the keyword, kind of all the technical jargon and that's involved in SEO and search engine visibility, but are these transactional? Are these informational? Are these navigational? And you need to align your strategy with the intent. It actually has to kind of start with the intent, because if you're not aligning with the intent, you're just not going to get on the page, even if you do everything else right. You might be aligning with the intent by mistake, and that might get you on the page, but it's more helpful to just know it up front and build that strategy around the intent, and then go from there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you're obviously going to perform worse with a transactional page on a search term which is actually more informational based.
Well, you just won't show up, and I mean, same thing with if you're writing a blog post, it's all like informational, and the keyword is actually transactional. You're just not going to show up. Like Google's already made the determination that they're going to only elevate transactional pages for this keyword, at least on the first page. And so again, like all that effort is kind of lost unless you really understand the intent of the keyword, and you have to go to the page to see it yourself.
Yeah. And I suppose that feeds into that, kind of SEO strategy. And when people get themselves from, page 7 to page 2, and then get stuck, I guess potentially part of the reason is they've got that intent wrong, and then they might be quite close, which is why they can get themselves up to page 2.
Yeah, and it
But
feels really good to go that fast. It feels like you're doing the right things. And I think a lot of SEO agencies show, they're able to show results, so to speak. They say, oh, well, we jumped you up like 17 positions or something. Well, unless you're on page 1, that had absolutely zero impact on your bottom line, right?
yeah,
So,
I guess it's one of those. It's almost like a vanity metric in a way. We jumped you up like 17 positions, but if you're not on page 1, you're not getting the traffic. And then it's kind of, I guess, easy for them to say, well, obviously what we do works because we got you that uplift, but page 1 is really difficult to crack, so we're going to have to work at it for quite a while.
Yeah. No. Oh my God. Yeah. You're exactly towing the line. Yep.
I mean, maybe I'm just a bit skeptical, but it surprised me if you saw that. I mean, it's at least, well, I don't know if it's better or worse, but I know my junk box is full of emails promising me page 1 straight away.
Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, those are just there. You can't buy page 1. You can't, unless you want to do PPC, like you mentioned. You can't buy it. And I think the other piece of it that which we haven't really talked about is PR is also a primary vehicle for link building, and a lot of our clients on the agency side hire. A big reason why they're hiring an agency is for those backlinks, and especially high quality backlinks from reputable authoritative websites. Those you basically have to pay an agency to go out and acquire for you, and the agent spends a lot of time and effort doing it. And without those backlinks, you're just stuck. You can't. Your domain is never going to be seen as an authority by Google unless there are other important websites pointing back at you. And so, yeah, I think it's a big game, right? Like it's a big kind of game of social media in some ways, as everyone decides like who's important.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know much about Blackout strategies these days, but I imagine it probably still is possible to get to page 1 pretty quickly, but you're just going to get removed probably equally as quickly. So you might see.
I think Google has, and I can't speak super authoritatively about this, but everything I've read is that Google has really worked hard to prevent that sort of thing from happening. And in fact, there is a consensus in the SEO world that having a follow link from a website of ill repute, like one of these black hat kind of link farms, can actually negatively affect your link juice or domain authority.
It doesn't surprise me really. It's Google saying, well, you're trying to cheat the system, so you're going to get penalized for that. Like, you're not just going to not get a benefit.
And they're basically saying like, we like this website we flagged as a spammy website, and the fact that they linking to you means that they think that you're also a spammy website.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think there's any like definitive proof that happens, but I think there's a sentiment in the SEO community that is something that is part of the algorithm these days.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. What do you think? Do you see any big trends coming up in the next maybe kind of 12 to 18 months?
Well, I hope that search engine visibility becomes, catches on. I think that it's high time that we start thinking about more ways to promote a brand in search. I think that the PR community has been really myopic about how it reports and measures its success, and also about how they go about acquiring PR hits. I think that to go out and acquire a PR article, and even if it's in a large name publication, if there's no follow link and it's not showing up in search, the actual value of that article is incredibly low. I mean, maybe it's nice to say that, some special website talked about you and tell your own followers that, but there's virtually no one who's going to see it, at the end of the day, because it's so buried underneath a pile of content. So, pivoting your perspective around, let's just focus on these domains and these writers that are showing up in search, puts you in front of this insanely qualified customer that is a pretty evergreen audience, right? Like, it's not just a one hit. It's like, for almost every single PR hit out there, you get this flash of interest the moment that it's published. I call it like a flicker of it's a flicker of a moment that it's published. And then as soon as it's kind of dropped off of the top of the fold, or like the homepage of the website that published it, or it's no longer being circulated in promotional emails, that article, for all intents and purposes, is dead. It will never show up again unless it's in a popular search, in which case it receives traffic into perpetuity. Yeah. It's really, really high quality traffic. And I think for PR people to recognize that their work can go so much farther, and the hit that they work on each one of these like articles so long, right? Like, it takes so much work and effort to land each one of these articles. You have to reach out to the art. It's not like, it sounds so laborious, like the way that I talk about, like, oh, we have to build these keywords and then we bucket them and then we do the outreach. Well, all that outreach is already happening. Like, that's what PR people do all day, every day. Is all they're doing is going out and like reaching out to people and talking to them and trying to get them to write about their stuff. So it's a slight pivot about who you're talking to. That's really all it is. And when you do that slight pivot and you win those placements, the incremental benefit of being on search versus not being in search is so much, right? It's like, you're just getting in front of so much more people, and those customers are so much more interested in that type of content, and your clients will absolutely notice the difference.
Yeah. I mean, I've been involved in PR. Well, not been involved in PR, but I've run PR campaigns with agencies, and you notice the difference when you get that really good piece of exposure, which is, on a really popular, authoritative website, and it stays on page one and continuously gets that traffic. And then you get that one campaign would have driven, I don't know, it might have got you like 40, 50 pieces of coverage, but there's that one or two that really provide that value. And the rest of them, like you say, they kind of drop off. And all right, you've probably got a link. It might be a follow link. It might be just because you can have kind of a no reference on it, can't you? You can have follow, no follow, but then there's ones that are not tagged either way. Is that right? Or is the default follow?
Yeah, I think default is follow. You have to put a little bit of extra code in there to make it a no follow link.
Yeah.
A lot of websites, they hard code in every single link every single outgoing link they have in the site is a no follow link. Sometimes that's a hard coded thing that they put into their web development. I think it makes sense why you would no follow. There's a couple very reasonable situations, like for instance, affiliate links. In PR these days, there's so many kind of buy now links out there, and they're all driving back to Amazon or some other major online retailer. And those should not be followed links. Like, those are, all those buy now links, they're all kind of pay to play because they're actually receiving a commission for all those clicks. And so, Google doesn't want those to be followed links. Otherwise, Amazon would be insane. It would be even more insanely powerful than it is today. The other reason, I think, is that to your point earlier about Blackout strategy, Google's trying to decentivize the whole practice of selling access to links, and they really want publishers to say, hey, if this is a contributor and not a staff writer, we don't want you to follow any of their links. Now, there's a lot of controversy about that in the SEO world because they're like, well, these are very qualified people, and just because they're not on staff doesn't mean that their opinions and their links are invalid. But Google sees it as, well, that opens up to the realm possibility that they're selling, access to a really valuable website.
Yeah.
So, for however you wish to see it, I think those are common circumstances where there's no follow. And, social media is all no follow. Like, obviously, you can't just go up on Facebook and like post your own link on there, and you're not going to get like link juice from Facebook.
Yeah, and I think things like comments, like links in comments, don't get like indexed and
followed.
Or followed.
Yeah, right.
And there was one startup or one in particular that did really well off this. I think it might have been Hotjar, but I might be wrong with that. But it was one of these sites which it would have like a pop-up displaying on its clients' websites for their customers to interact with, and at the bottom it would say powered by this company, and that was a follow link.
Oh my God.
And they did amazingly well from it. And then I think Google clicked, it was like one of the first times this had ever happened. And then I think Google clicked and went, do you know what? Actually, you can't do that because you're just going to get a follow link on every client's website.
That's brilliant though. I mean, good for them for figuring that out. But yeah, totally. I'm sure all those circumstances are like those aha moments where you're sitting in a small conference room with all your peers and you're like, what if we did this?
Yeah. I mean, it worked for them. It did really, really well. And then it kind of spawned this whole, make sure you've got a freemium plan with powered by the brand. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all dead now.
Yeah, I would imagine it is. Google picks up on that stuff really fast. As soon as somebody's trying to game the system, they'll catch up on it really quickly. I don't know how they do it, but they do a good job of it.
Yeah. So, do you have any pet peeves when it comes to marketing?
Oh, so many. Where do we start with that? I think my biggest pet peeve, and this comes out of the PR industry, is untargeted solicitation, right? When you are basically spamming people, and PR people are definitely at fault for this all the time. Email marketers are at fault for this all the time. But same thing with display marketers. Like, one of my big pet peeves is that I'll go buy a hammer from like Home Depot, and they'll capture my cookie, but they don't actually capture the fact that I already made the purchase. And then I get retargeted for hammers from Home Depot for the next 30 days. And I'm like, come on, guys, I already bought your freaking tool. You don't have to keep sending me these ads, So I think it's that sort of thing. Like, I think marketers have a real opportunity to provide value and utility, and we only do it sometimes. We don't do it well. Like, we just try to focus on shooting shotguns into the air and hoping that we hit something. But good marketing should be that we are connecting a needed message with somebody who needs it, like a good message with somebody who needs it. And I always call this just being meaningful about our communication strategy. How do we connect meaningfully? And that's something we talk about a lot at our agency, is how do we facilitate meaningful communication? And I think the pandemic is a really interesting analogy here, because there are brands that are doing well right now, and there are a lot of brands that aren't. And sometimes it's their fault, sometimes it's not. But the brands that are doing well, by and large, have figured out how to provide utility and support to people in a time of need, and not be opportunistic about it, but be helpful. And when you're empathetic like that with your marketing, I think it can be really, really powerful. And you'll have a really robust brand, and people will really like what you're doing. But when you are opportunistic and you're untargeted, and you're not focusing your message on the people who need it, then people get annoyed. And that's why marketers have a bad rap, is because we're sending messages out to people who don't want them. So, hopefully we're developing better tools. Search is that's one reason why I love search so much, is because we're only focusing on customers who want our stuff. But there are much better tools out there to kind of connect the right people with the right communications.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of laziness, really, isn't it? It's people getting things set up, but then not taking the time to actually, filter out certain people or just ensure they are targeting the right people. So it's, like with those display ads, they haven't done the job of filtering out people who have purchased.
Or
potentially,
they're just getting greedy, and they're just saying, oh, well, I know 1 in 1,000 of these people are interested, and it's really low. It doesn't cost me very much money to reach out to all 1,000. And if I get one sale out of it, it'll make money for me. And so they're just like, they're okay with pissing off 999 people if they get that one sale, And so I personally think that, a lot of it's a law of large numbers, and them just knowing that they'll make a little bit of money, even if that's all it is. But it's just bad practice, right? Like it doesn't develop loyalty or anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel there's an area of marketing or a marketing channel or tactic which is a bit underrated?
Oh, good question. I think that I'm really interested in the whole influencer model right now, and I think influencers are a really interesting bunch. It kind of teeters on PR, it kind of teeters on kind of athletes and paid sponsorships and things like that. But having this kind of grassroots endorsement of products and services or whatever it might be, in this kind of managing a more peer-to-peer relationship between a brand and a customer is, I think it's a Wild West. It's hard to figure out like who's really going to pay off for you, but there are better tools there. And it's an area that I see going to be continually very interesting and evolving and valuable to the marketing tool set, especially for lifestyle brands. Because, and not just lifestyle brands, I mean, even B2B brands like say Visably, I think influencers, there's so many educators in the marketing field. They're all influencers, right? Like whatever they say, people listen to. And yeah, I think influencers are going to be, this realm of social media and TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all these kind of platforms that we're using now to connect with each other, especially through a pandemic, they're going to be more and more powerful as certain personalities kind of organically rise to the top. And, figuring out how to leverage those people will be important.
Yeah, completely agree. I do like influence marketing. I think it has got a place. What I don't necessarily like so much is simply just paying people to promote your product, like post on Instagram. I don't really feel like that is influencer marketing. I think kind of like you kind of mentioned, it should be people who are happy to talk about your product, and they genuinely like it and they like your product or service and they want to promote it. And I think it's fine for them to get compensated for that. But I don't think it's real influencer marketing if you just get 10 Instagrammers to just do a post about you with some pretext. Preset
I completely agree with you. I think that's why it's such a fuzzy discipline right now. We haven't really figured out how to manage it. Maybe we won't at the end of the day because it is so grassrootsy. But it's really interesting. It is effective. One of the things that our agency does is a lot of crowdfunding, and we find that we work on multi-million-dollar crowdfunding campaigns, and to push a campaign into that kind of stratosphere, you need that kind of social support, that groundswell, if you will, of support. And so we've been using influencers to do that very successfully. And, the way that we see it is that these are people who are professional content creators, for the most part. Like, they're really good at photography and videography and setting up, beautiful shoots. And the way we see it is we're paying them as a content creator, and then we get to keep some of that content. And so we're essentially, like, whether they were putting it posting on a social feed or not is kind of like beside the point. We're paying them for the content. And then they, as a byproduct, typically post it as well, because at that point they like it and they're proud of their own work, and they, we did pay them to create it. So, anyways, that's kind of the way we approach it.
It's kind of that exact bit you mentioned. They're proud of their work. They're happy to promote it, and these are the people who probably, I would imagine, consider whether they're going to work with that brand. Whether it fits their audience, whether it fits their style and stuff.
Yeah, and it has to be a mutual fit, right? Like, there's some people reach out to us, and sometimes we reach out to them, and I think it's fair to compensate them for their time to create this content. That's the same thing that we would do if we were to go out and hire a freelance photographer to write, to do a photo shoot. It didn't show up on social media. Like, we're still paying somebody for their time to produce content. So the fact that they have a robust social following is just a bonus.
Yeah, exactly. So, this has been really fantastic stuff. I really like this idea of kind of taking every opportunity and every touch point to really dominate page one and get the most value from it. How can people find out more or get in touch with you?
Thank you. So the best way I would say is either LinkedIn or Twitter. Chris Dickey is my name, Dickey. And my Twitter handle is Visably_SEO. And then we love for people to come and check out Visably. It's in beta. It's absolutely free. There's no credit card required. You just make a very simple free account. It's pretty frictionless. And then you can use it as much as you wish. And so and you'll be really happy to know that you can pick any place in the world to execute a search from. We have over 200 search locations that are built into the software. That's part of the freemium version. So anybody can kind of show up. They can search in the UK. They can search in Germany. They can search in Brazil. Whatever they want to do. And it's a great way to start to put together this multi-channel strategy for your brand.
All right, that sounds brilliant. I'll make sure to put a link to it on the Customers Who Click site.
Yeah, and just because it sounds kind of funny, it's visably.com. So it's visably.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
So while SEO is all the rage, everyone understands that you need to have that organic presence to support your paid marketing efforts. This idea of dominating page one in this way isn't talked about as much at all. In a sense, it's still SEO. You're still optimizing your search presence. It's just not on your site. It's similar to what I talked about with David Fraser in episode 15 about PR for SEO. Their PR efforts focus on getting you meaningful exposure and links back to your site, but you're also getting those page one placements as well. It's similar to what I talked about with David Fraser in episode 15 about PR for SEO. Their PR efforts focus on getting you meaningful exposure and links back to your site, but you're also getting those page one placements as well. If you're in a really competitive industry, struggling with your SEO strategy, or just looking for more opportunities to capture market share, this episode has outlined a really good approach you can take to this. If you'd like to learn more, just reach out to Chris on LinkedIn or go to visably.com. It's Visably. Keep your marketing questions coming into will@customerswhoclick.com. I get back to people as quickly as I can. In the next episode, I've got Josh Boone from Pure Web Results with me talking about this idea of 4D marketing. But until then, keep those customers clicking.